This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
COVID-19 pandemic remains China's top priority, says the country's top political advisory body ahead of its annual session. Burundians vote in their first competitive presidential election since a civil war erupted in 1993. And war on terror. The United States resumes airstrikes against al-Shabaab in Somalia. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers and I'll be with you for the next hour. But joining us for the latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's Reserve Bank set to cut lending rates to a historic low. And Kenya unveils a $500 million stimulus package for small businesses. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
We'll see you in a bit, Uche. Thank you. China's top legislature and political advisory body are gearing up for a key annual event. The annual two sessions kicks off this Thursday. A spokesperson for the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference says fighting the COVID-19 pandemic remains the most pressing matter on the table. He also says China is still committed to achieving its goal of eradicating extreme poverty by the end of this year.
The CPPCC National Committee closely watches the impact of COVID-19 on poverty alleviation. We have conducted thorough researches and proposed many useful recommendations. This year, the National Committee will convene a special standing committee meeting on eliminating absolute poverty and establishing a long-term mechanism for addressing relative poverty, and continue its work through various means. We will further improve the quality of our work to facilitate high-quality poverty alleviation and continue to play an active role in battling and ending poverty in China.
The spokesperson says the two sessions will focus on ways to improve the emergency response to secure public health. The major political gathering has been delayed by over 2 months due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It kicks off Thursday and will last until May the 27th, 4 days shorter than planned. Its most important functions are giving political consultations and democratic supervision. This year's two sessions will likely take place with some significant changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's CGTN's Robert Lawrence Kuhn with more.
What will happen at this year's two sessions? Liang Hui, political meetings, the National People's Congress, NPC, and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, CPPCC, postponed from the two sessions' traditional time of early March to late May because of the COVID-19 pandemic. One need not be a political insider to forecast at least 4 major themes: enforcing strict safety measures to keep participants ultra safe, stressing short-term policies to support the economy, reinforcing the long-term strategic vision of rejuvenating the nation, and continuing to improve the healthcare system. I'll take them in order. First, this will be a very different two sessions. I've attended for the last 5 years, but this time I couldn't come because of the pandemic in the US and China's restriction on foreigners. The number of journalists is greatly reduced from around 3,000 normally to just a few hundred. Moreover, all reporters, Chinese and foreign, must be already in Beijing. Some will be invited to conduct interviews in the Great Hall of the People, although most will be conducted electronically with delegates at their residences. A pre-two sessions communication stressed upholding the spirit of openness and transparency. Press spokesmen will release information in a timely manner. The 2 sessions will be shorter than usual, 1 week instead of 2, and social distancing will be enforced. In addition to protecting delegates, officials, workers, these measures send a message to the country to remain alert and prevent new outbreaks. Second, policies to kickstart the economy yet to guard against financial risk will be discussed. How open will debates over policies be? For example, the kinds and amounts of stimulus packages, infrastructure versus target subsidies like alternative energy and new energy vehicles. What about the division of control between central and local government, especially the legal capacity of provinces to raise funds for infrastructure projects? Third, a recommitment to achieve China's 2 centenary goals. This year, the moderately prosperous society, as next year is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China, and by mid-century, the full modernization and great rejuvenation of the nation, the Chinese dream. 2049 is the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. These goals stress for this year's moderately prosperous society an intense focus on China's targeted poverty alleviation campaign, which intends, according to plan, to eliminate all extreme poverty in the country. I expect to hear the recent party slogan, "Don't forget your original aspirations, firmly remember your mission." And fourth, a commitment to continue to upgrade the nation's healthcare system, not only with respect to identifying and containing potential epidemics rapidly, but also to providing quality health care to all citizens, especially those in rural areas. With respect to epidemics, China says it will improve its system of information collection and feedback, error correction, and decision-making. Although foreign media will be watching the 2 sessions to assess China's engagement with the world, officials and delegates will almost entirely be focused on domestic issues, as well they should. The better China takes care of itself and its own economy, the better China can contribute to the world.
A point of discussion during the upcoming 2 sessions is the wearing of masks. CGTN takes a look at why this is likely to be the case.
What was the must-have but hard-to-find gift during the 2020 Spring Festival? I would say masks. Since the outbreak of novel coronavirus, masks have become a living necessity. When we walk outside, we have to put on a mask, just like wearing shoes. Honestly, China was not fully prepared at the early stage, and medical supplies, including masks, were soon out of stock. Nevertheless, medical treatment should be intensified. People's livelihood should be guaranteed. City facilities should function normally, and energy supplies should be assured. The outbreak is a major test for China's system and capacity for governance. Be ready to change and improve. This is a critical part of China's governance system. After identifying the shortcomings and deficiencies in the initial response to the epidemic, China shows unprecedented mobilization in public health history. Social distancing policies were introduced to slow the rate of transmission. Over 42,000 medical staff in the country have been dispatched to the epicenter. Temporary hospitals were built. Factories were transformed to produce medical supplies. Scientists have rapidly sequenced the virus genome and shared it globally. The World Health Organization appreciated China's responses to the outbreak. It said China has made obvious effect in blocking human-to-human transmission of the virus. China has also prevented or at least delayed hundreds of thousands of cases. Meanwhile, China has also played a critical role in protecting the international community, buying precious time for other countries to adopt active prevention and control measures, and providing them with worthwhile experience. A strong central leadership and a top-down decision system is a unique feature of China. It's working efficiently at curbing the virus. A further improvement of China's governing system also continues. For instance, we should continue improving the mechanism for major epidemic prevention and control. The National Public Health Emergency Management System should also be enhanced. During this year's 2 sessions, the NPC deputies and the country's top political advisors will discuss more about it. What motions and proposals will be put forward in response to the coronavirus? We, the Chinese people, and the whole world will be watching it closely.
Beijing has voiced strong opposition to a move by the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo Tuesday sent a congratulatory message to the Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen on her inauguration.
The
actions by the U.S. have seriously violated the One China policy and the provisions of the 3 China-U.S. joint communiques. The move is a grave interference with China's internal affairs. China strongly condemns this action. There's only one China in the world, and Taiwan is an inalienable part of Chinese territory. The joint communique stipulates that the United States recognizes the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole government of China.
Pompeo also voiced support, saying the U.S. has long considered Taiwan a reliable partner. China says it will not tolerate any act which aims to separate Taiwan from the Chinese mainland. China today reiterated that reunification cannot be stopped by anyone or any force. This is a statement from the Taiwan Affairs Office of China's State Council in reaction to Taiwan leader Tsai Ing-wen's report on cross-strait relations. Spokesperson Ma Xiangwang said China's national reunification is critical to the nation's rejuvenation and cannot be stopped. Ma said Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party authority has refused to recognize the 1992 consensus, thus undermining the political foundation for building peaceful cross-strait relations. The Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council also said that seeking Taiwan independence harms the well-being of Taiwan compatriots and the Chinese nation's interest. It said that the Chinese central government would not condone separatist activities and added that the Chinese mainland would work with its compatriots to Taiwan to promote cross-strait exchange and cooperation. Well, let's now take a look at the latest figures on the COVID-19 pandemic. Global cases are nearing the 5 million mark, with the death toll over 323,000. The U.S. accounts for more than a third of the global total at 91,000 deaths. Russia has the second highest infections, with over 308,000 confirmed cases and almost 3,000 deaths. Brazil has registered more than 1,000 deaths in the past 24 hours, the highest daily record, bringing its death toll to almost 18,000. Leaders of African countries have expressed concern over what they say is a lack of support by wealthy nations during the coronavirus period. Financial assistance and debt relief, according to some heads of state, is falling short of what the continent needs as it fights against the pandemic. Developed countries have so far invested into their home countries' health initiatives and economies. However, developing states say that they cannot afford to adapt the same measures. Despite recording only a fraction of the world's cases, Africa's capacity to test remains limited. It has also suffered blows from economic fallouts from global disruptions in trade, falling oil prices, and lockdowns imposed to curb the spread of COVID-19. The continent is calling for a $100 billion stimulus package, a waiver of bilateral debt, and a suspension of private debt service. Meanwhile, African leaders have hailed President Xi Jinping's speech delivered at the 73rd World Health Assembly. President Xi announced more plans to support countries and peoples most severely affected by COVID-19, especially developing countries.
What we have seen in terms of the Chinese government's actions is something that we are studying to learn from, so that we can also be able to control the pandemic quickly in Africa. We are quite clear that early action is what results in quick control. And early action is what we saw in China, and early action is what we are doing here in Africa. Some of the biggest challenges that we are facing are around the supplies that we need to provide to our health workers to address issues around COVID-19. And this is because manufacturing is very slow in Africa, and we always need to import the supplies that we need to fight this particular pandemic.
First of all, this promotes the international cooperation and also the lead in global governance and public health. You also know that developing countries were hit hard with the coronavirus, and some people could not be able to find food, and countries have been struggling to give them food rations, daily food rations, on top of the budgets to fight the coronavirus pandemic. So this support is going to help these countries to restore their economies and also the social development in the countries.
Meanwhile, South Africa has begun clinical trials to investigate if a dose of the BCG vaccine can be used in the fight against the coronavirus. If successful, officials say this could give the continent a cheap weapon to deter the spread of COVID-19. The vaccine, widely used for tuberculosis, is also undergoing testing in the Netherlands and Australia to see if it can protect against the virus. In South Africa, immunization is administered upon birth, and if rolled out, people would be injected a second time. Researchers expect preliminary results within 6 months in the year-long trial. The vaccine is said to be safe and is readily available in Africa. It is believed that countries with limited health resources could benefit from the discovery.
We are very proud to do this study in South Africa because we believe that especially countries that have restricted health care resources might benefit from a simple intervention like this first, because we just can't ramp up our hospital infrastructure and especially the lack of personnel as quickly as other countries probably can.
A company based in South Africa is developing plant-based materials for use in COVID-19 testing kits. There has been increasing demand for reagents used in coronavirus tests. And as CGTN's Travis Andrews reports, Cape Biofarms is trying to ease that shortage.
Tobacco products may be banned in South Africa due to COVID-19 health-related issues, but the tobacco plant is being used at the forefront of trying to contain the disease. It's been a busy few weeks for Cape Biofarms, a company that's using innovation and plants to produce antigens required for rapid COVID-19 serology testing.
We create or grow pharmaceutical proteins in a distant cousin of the tobacco plant. So it's not a plant you can smoke. It's called Nicotiana benthamiana, and it's perfectly suited to create and to grow protein. The plants are very good at producing protein. We just trick the plant into producing a sort of foreign protein.
By doing that, the company has been able to respond relatively quickly to the demand of COVID-19 testing by producing antigens that can be supplied to test kit manufacturers. At the Cape Town-based facility, The team harvests and infiltrates the plants into highly effective bioreactors. More than 15 staff enhance the production from the grow room through to the labs.
Unlike traditional systems, you get these large mammalian cell culture systems, lots of stainless steel, very, very expensive. It'll set you back almost between $100 to $500 million to build one of those, which is why South Africa and most of Africa doesn't have one. We've been able to build this system for literally a tenth of that cost. And very quickly, most of those other traditional systems can take months, or rather years to build, rather.
Cape Biofarms has also sent samples of its antigens to local test kit manufacturers who are validating its proteins externally. Now, as one can imagine, this technology is in demand around the world. And Cape Biofarms is already collaborating with other countries to fight COVID-19.
We've formed what's called the Plants Against Corona Network, which is, as I mentioned, all these different plant-based manufacturing institutes and companies around the world have joined forces, and we are all producing these coronavirus antigens, and we're all going to be sharing our developments and our IP going forward. So this network actually gives us quite a bit of strength.
For now, the company remains hard at work at increasing its capacity so that as much people can be tested for the virus antibodies as possible in order to finally flatten the curve of this destructive disease. That's Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Schools in Nigeria have been offering online lessons since the government ordered their closure 2 months ago. The country has recorded over 6,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. National statistics show that more than 80 million people in Nigeria live in extreme poverty, and they will require government support to access virtual education. Correspondent Phil Haza reports from Abuja.
Hi, Mr. Fokker. Good to see you.
Clara Achombi is getting her children prepared for their online morning lessons at home. Her daughters have been away from school since March, but she says they've still made progress with their education remotely.
My children have been out of school for about 2 months now, and the virtual learning came up, and I'm happy because it's helping them to keep abreast of what's happening in school and all that. So I was worried initially, but I'm okay now. I just need to set up for them, and they are good to go. So I think it's very okay, and I'm comfortable with it.
Just like Clara's children's school, many learning institutions are also teaching pupils via the internet. This became necessary when the government closed down all schools indefinitely in March due to the coronavirus pandemic. The government has urged all the schools embracing e-learning to ensure they follow the existing curriculum. Experts say schools may need to learn lessons from the experience too.
I would advise that school owners should make this e-learning a long-time project. Don't budget for this as something that you want to do because of the COVID-19 era. No. Invest in it. If you are making use of different technologies like the Zoom, the Google Classroom, or the WhatsApp, make sure that you are incorporating this in your school. Let it be there for a long-term project, because during the holidays, some parents might want to engage their words for this e-learning.
However, some families like that of Susan Oshoke say the cost of internet data is too high. Susan's children have not been participating in their school's e-learning.
Now, I'm just one parent that couldn't afford it. I'm sure there are many others that can't. So because of the extra devices that is needed and the internet data that is also needed, which is expensive for me.
The government says it is in talks with internet service providers to reduce the cost of data during this period.
With the rising cases of coronavirus infections in Nigeria, it is not clear when school premises across the country will be permitted to open again. And while the government and health officials battle daily to contain the spread of the virus, the hope is that the country will be rid of the disease soon for millions of children to gain access to their education. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Time for us to take a short break and return to more news making headlines, including war on terror. The United States resumes airstrikes against Al-Shabaab in Somalia. And Burundians vote in their first competitive presidential election since a civil war erupted in 1993.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. you got to get out, go there and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines right here on Africa Live. Burundians have voted in the country's crucial general elections despite the coronavirus outbreak. President Pierre Nkurunziza is expected to step down after 15 years. The election, if successful, will usher in the first democratic transition since independence. If no candidate secures a 50% majority in the first round, a runoff will take place within 2 weeks. Citizens are electing their president, members of parliament, and communal council members. There are 7 candidates seeking to replace long-serving President Pierre Nkurunziza, the 2 main contenders being Agathon Rwasa and of the opposition CNL party, and Viviers Ndayishimiye from the ruling CNDD-FDD party. Preliminary results for the polls are expected to be out on the 25th of May. Let's shift our focus to the Horn of Africa now, where the United States has resumed its aerial offensive against al-Shabaab militants. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello is in the capital Mogadishu and explains why the strikes are so important.
An aerial strike south of Mogadishu has killed 2 al-Shabaab fighters. The attack took place in Kunya Baro, an agricultural town in the Lower Shabelle region. It's the first strike to be conducted by the U.S. military in Somalia in over a month. Pentagon hasn't confirmed the identities of the fighters killed, but in the past, it has targeted training camps, al-Shabaab convoys, and some of the group's top commanders.
It's been very helpful, and actually most of the Somalis really appreciate AFRICOM being part of the game. Without them, I think the game could have been much worse to Somalis.
An attack on an army base in the Lower Juba region last week is believed to have prompted the resumption of an aerial offensive. Al-Shabaab has targeted Jubaland forces in Bilis Kokani, an attack that left 3 fighters dead. The Al-Qaeda-linked group is known to increase its attacks during the fasting period of Ramadan.
That's when we need to also increase our defenses as well as the pushbacks that we have been. There's enough encouraging signs that now AMISOM and the federal government and the federal member states are all trying to push further and further, but it needs the sustainability. And what we have not yet achieved is sustaining the pressure and keeping the areas we have recovered from al-Shabaab.
In recent months, the country's army has captured strategic towns and villages from al-Shabaab. The operations have mostly focused on the Lower Shabelle and Lower Juba region along the border with Kenya.
Our target is to weaken them by targeting their bases, fighters and top commanders. We kill them all, including their sympathizers and informers. This is a message to those hiding in the public and working for the militant group. The enemy within is more dangerous than the enemy outside.
Meanwhile, as the world focuses on combating COVID-19, the National Army has taken part in a massive awareness program that provides face masks to thousands of vulnerable people in displaced camps. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Meanwhile, Southern African nations have pledged to assist Mozambique fight insurgents who pose an increasingly complex threat to the region. The leaders of Botswana, Zambia and Mozambique made the declaration after a meeting hosted on Tuesday by the Zimbabwean president.
These are frantic times for the SADC region, which is why its tripartite organ on politics, defense and security convened this emergency meeting amidst COVID-19 travel restrictions to tackle the mounting concerns. A peaceful transition of power in Lesotho, a forthcoming rerun of presidential elections in Malawi, and how the region is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic were all on the agenda here. But special attention was on that growing security concern in Mozambique. Armed insurgents have been killing and kidnapping civilians in villages in the gas-rich northeast of the country since 2017. They have recently stepped up their campaign of violence, drawing the attention of other countries in the hinterland.
SADC region is equally affected by this growing risk of violent religious extremism, radicalization, and terrorism, a worrying situation for peace, security, and development in our region. In addition, the modus operandi of the terrorist groups and networks are intricate and elaborate.
After hours of deliberations, the leaders were unanimous.
The extraordinary organ Troika Summit plus Mozambique committed and urged SADC member states to support the government of Mozambique in fighting against the terrorist and armed groups in some districts of Cabo Delgado.
They did not say what form the support will take or when it will begin, but promised more details as the situation develops.
The terrorism you can't fight alone everywhere. This is the experience what we have. We needed to share the forces, not only in region, probably for Africa, for all weight, but the steps now today was real to try to brief our colleagues what we're doing, and also I had meetings bilateral with each country and try to discuss what can be done. It will be the next step and we'll let you know.
Several international energy firms are developing multi-billion-dollar natural gas projects in the country's terror-racked Cabo Delgado region. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
We're now going to hand over to Uche for the latest in business news.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's Reserve Bank set to cut lending rates to a historic low. And Kenya unveils a $500 million stimulus package for small businesses.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of the trader in a bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa. The country's central bank is expected to cut interest rates to a 50-year low. Economists, however, said the bank will resist a pressure to adopt qualitative easing. Pressure has been mounting on the bank to print money in order to stimulate the struggling economy, but the bank has already stepped up its buying of public debt. It has also purchased government bonds worth around $1.2 billion. Polls now predict the Reserve Bank will lower its borrowing costs by 50 basis points to 3.75%. That's with a 100 basis points cut seen as possible. That is on top of 225 basis points of rate reductions since March. Of course, South Africa's budget deficit is expected to rise by around 15% due to the COVID-19 crisis. The Treasury says 2/3 of its $27 billion stimulus plan will be funded with loans from the IMF and other development institutions. The government is also eyeing the capital markets and revised spending. Meanwhile, Kenya plans to spend $503 million on a stimulus package in order to support businesses that have been hit by the coronavirus pandemic. According to the National Treasury, the post-COVID-19 economic stimulus package will provide credit guarantees, loans to small businesses, and help prop up tourist facilities. East Africa's largest economy faces a severe hit from the virus fallout. The nation was already struggling to boost revenue and fund development projects. That's before the outbreak. The government has cut its projected growth to 2.5% this year, down from earlier estimates of around 6.2%. Kenya also plans to fast-track the payment of pending bills and tax refunds to companies. The stimulus package will take effect in the fiscal year starting July 1st. And heading back to South Africa, where the Gauteng province has projected about 2 million job losses as a result of the ongoing lockdown. Premier David Makura said they will move to a less restrictive lockdown level at the beginning of June. This will provide much needed relief from an unprecedented economic and human catastrophe. While addressing a virtual sitting of the provincial legislature, the Premier said that Gauteng may witness a Great Depression as a result of the COVID-19 effects. Now, the province contributes up to a third of South Africa's GDP. Currently, about 600,000 people are getting food parcels in order to cope with the impact of the lockdown. South Africa is under lockdown in phases. The phases range from level 5 at its strictest to level 1 at its most relaxed. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has promised a relaxation to level 3 at the end of May. Now, the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area deal has suffered a major setback due to the coronavirus pandemic. The free trade area was set to be launched in July this year, but that has now been postponed indefinitely. Now, some analysts, however, say the COVID-19 pandemic provides an opportunity to begin implementing the free trade of essential goods and services. Here's CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai with more from Accra.
A landmark free trade agreement was meant to be up and running by July, but following the outbreak of the coronavirus, officials could not move in to the secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area in Ghana's capital, Accra. The launch has now been postponed.
If we don't pay particular attention going forward to the impact of the potentially disruptive impact of health issues on trade, we will not be doing justice to ourselves. And so that is a matter that we have agreed with the CDC in the implementation of the agreement to look at how we can mitigate the risk caused by pandemics on trade.
The African Continental Free Trade Area is expected to open the market for 1.3 billion people and boost intra-African trade. With border closures and the restrictions of movement of people caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, trade among African countries has been badly hit. But some analysts say the free trade agreement could still be implemented amidst the pandemic with focus on essential goods, including drugs and personal protective equipment.
We have agreed to have a free trade area. It can continue. The only phases and areas that need to be suspended for the time being, those are maybe the ones that they have to recommend. And let's say free movement of people, which have been affected now. You can't be moving from one country to another. But goods and services, now cargoes are being done. So a political decision can be made by the health system. Okay, let's trading still commence maybe in September or October, but for these areas.
While member countries have taxes waived on 90% of goods, they have yet to submit a list for the 10% of goods that will attract taxes, something analysts want done before the Secretariat sets a new launch date.
With the deferment of the commencement of the trading, it gives governments across Africa enough time to work with their private sectors, trade union organizations, to identify what constitute 10% exclusion list, so that once trading starts next year, there wouldn't be anything back and forth.
Analysts suggest that these negotiations with member countries be done virtually through video conferencing.
The Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area has yet to disclose when it will launch the agreement, but some experts are predicting next year. Meanwhile, with the implementation challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic, analysts say it's become critical to allow free trade of essential goods to reduce the impact of the health crisis on the continent. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And now to some international news. Chinese telecom giant Huawei has entered a multi-million-dollar deal with Imperial College of London to jointly develop new technologies. Naweed Jabrakil has more from London.
And in particular, the goal...
In keeping with 2020, this year's UK Academic Salon, which brings together universities and businesses, was an online webinar. Kicking off the event, Chinese firm Huawei unveiled a $6.1 million sponsorship deal with London's Imperial College. The 5-year strategic partnership will see the two sides work together on future technologies like 5G.
We have joined nearly a decade of highly productive collaboration with Imperial College across many projects, and today's announcement is the latest chapter in that partnership. As part of this new collaboration, we will provide Imperial with world-leading technologies such as 5G, AI, cloud, for a new innovation center.
The university is one of the UK's leading research institutions and has close links to China. In a separate project, it's currently working with Chinese researchers to try and develop a vaccine for COVID-19. Commenting on Tuesday's announcement with Huawei, the provost said it's a sign of growing ties between the two sides.
Huawei is one of these partners who we've worked with for a long time and whose expertise in wireless technology will help us explore how the digital world will evolve, and indeed will help us to create the future digital ecosystem.
In January, Huawei was given the green light by the UK government to take part in its 5G infrastructure network. That decision has faced some criticism, particularly from members of the ruling Conservative Party. Critics say there are security concerns about working with the firm as it has close links to the Chinese state, a claim strongly denied by the company, as well as officials in Beijing. Huawei's vice president said Tuesday's announcement will help benefit students and businesses in the UK along with the wider tech ecosystem. The political pressure on Huawei may be there in the background, but this move marks an important venture for the Chinese tech giant at one of the world's leading universities. Naweed Jabrakil, CGTN, London.
Meanwhile, in Portugal, bars, cafes and restaurants have reopened. The country has a low coronavirus caseload despite having an aging population and, of course, the lowest number of ICU beds in Europe. Here's CGTN's Mia Alberti reporting from Lisbon.
For the first time in 2 months, the most famous pastry shop in Lisbon finally reopens.
It was a difficult decision to close for the first time in 43 years, but today we are excited to reopen and do what we do best.
I came here today to help this iconic house and also to give this sweet gift to family and friends. I'm sure they already miss these pastries a lot.
Restaurants, hairdressers, museums and most shops are also reopening. A sweet reward as Portugal maintains one of the lowest number of confirmed coronavirus cases per capita in Europe. Dr. Filipe Frões from the COVID-19 task force says Portugal had time to prepare, with the virus arriving later than in Spain and Italy.
We had precious days to implement a strategy that allowed us to prepare our hospital response. We also introduced the state of emergency and confinement measures earlier than these countries, so those measures had more impact.
Portugal quickly closed schools, borders, and closely monitored patients placed in home isolation. The number of ICU beds was increased by 35%. However, patient demand never reached full capacity. Most citizens also stayed at home despite the absence of a mandatory lockdown. The government says other restrictions might be lifted soon, like resuming religious services or football games, if the situation continues to improve.
The data is clear. We had a slowdown in the rhythm of new cases, fewer hospitalizations, fewer people in the ICU, a lower number of daily deaths. We have increased our testing capacity, so the criteria we set to control the pandemic has been fulfilled.
The government warns, however, that full safety from the virus won't be possible until there's a vaccine. Until then, social distancing and masks are part of the new normal. The Prime Minister has said he will have no problem in reintroducing the state of emergency if cases begin to rise again. So the situation will be reassessed every 15 days, and that's to give authorities some time to keep the pandemic under control and avoiding the economy into falling into yet another financial crisis. Mia Alberti, CGTN in Lisbon.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, Kenya bags $1 billion in loans, its largest windfall from the World Bank in years. Of course, we'll bring you more on that coming up top of the hour. For now, it is back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Uche. We're now going to take a short break and return. Saying it with music, Burkina Faso artiste pays tribute to health workers treating COVID-19 patients.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that, and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A new music video is paying tribute to health workers in Burkina Faso treating COVID-19 patients. Ali Verute produced a cover version of a world-famous Group Kassav song to encourage health workers. And as CGTN's Cham Gono now reports, the song is lifting the spirits of some healthcare practitioners who feel stigmatized.
One way.
All across the world, doctors and nurses died of COVID-19. They wanted to resuscitate people. They wanted to heal them, and they died instead of them or with them. They take risk for themselves and for their families. That's why I thought paying tribute to these people would be the best thing. It's better than singing about the disease and spread fear.
Les médecins, infirmiers, sages-femmes et tout le personnel soignant.
In Burkina Faso, our doctors were on strike and they were even fighting with the government. But due to the situation and to the importance of saving lives, they all gave up striking and went back to work. Night and day, they work and take risks despite the poor equipment that they have. They went back to work because life is better. Just because of that, I think we have to thank them.
Parce que la vie est encore mieux.
We feel encouraged. We are more or less flattered. The song gives us more strength and energy to continue treating patients, knowing that in the community, some people think of us in our work. It's motivating.
Our health system is obsolete. We know that. It's in most African countries. Working equipment is lacking. That's why everyone needs to understand health workers. There's a lot of sacrifice, and if they do it, we need to thank them.
Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse. Oui, c'est ça. Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse.
Music soothes the mind and speaks what cannot be expressed.
Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse. Oui, c'est ça. Les agents de santé, que Dieu vous bénisse.
And this song, Stallions of Health, has proven to do just that for the health workers in Burkina Faso. Chombono, CGTN.
Your sport news is coming up after the break. Here's what you can expect. Football fans in Tanzania look forward to the resumption of the sport in the country.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for your sport news. In Africa, all football action remains suspended. In Tanzania, fans of the country's two biggest football clubs, Simba and Yanga, say not being able to follow their teams has been one of the hardest parts of adjusting to restrictions. CGTN's Daniel Kija reports.
Tanzania's Premier League is home to one of the fiercest football derbies in Africa between Simba SC and Young Africans, or Yanga. Die-hard Yanga fan Jimmy Kindoki started following this 50-year-old rivalry at the age of 4, as both his mom and dad were also fans of Yanga. He says, no matter which side you support, the closure of the league 2 months ago leaves a big hole for fans.
Simba and Yanga always compete and tease each other, so we have been affected in a big way, because our addiction is football. So okay, there we can't go watch football at the pitch, we can't even watch it on TV. In the end, it's all pain. To be honest, now I even had to start watching cartoons to pass time.
Simba versus Young African matches are highly anticipated by football fans across Tanzania, so much that in a recent national address, the president said he's seriously considering resuming the league.
To be honest, in these coming days, I am considering allowing the league to resume so that as others play, fans can watch on TV. We will just put in place the correct measures.
Despite the fierce competition between the teams, fans from both sides are eager for the league to return.
I would love to see Simba win the championship because we're in a good position, but we would not like to be awarded the championship. We still want to play for it, fair and square.
As it stands this season, Simba has 71 points, having played 28 matches. It has 10 games to play. Yanga has 51 points and has played 21 matches, with 11 matches left. Many fans believe that bringing football back, even with no fans in attendance, will be a much appreciated morale boost for fans starved of action during the COVID-19 crisis. It is Simba FC that currently leads the standings. But who will be triumphant to the end? Well, fans from both sides will have to wait and see. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
In the midst of worldwide suspension of sporting events, the indefinite suspension of baseball, basketball, and ice hockey season in the U.S. has resulted in devastating financial impact on clubs and sporting venues. CGTN's Sarah Walton reports from New Jersey.
This is the Prudential Center, home to the New Jersey Devils ice hockey team. They've been playing here for more than a decade. They're used to welcoming thousands of fans to their games. This year, they played 16